Think that this book is very important, at least to me, because this is my attempt to make sense of the world and some of the mess that we're in right now. Because, face it, the world is a little bit confusing. The world, unfortunately, is real, as Borges puts it in A New Refutation of Time. I wouldn't go that far, but I would say that the world right now is a bit of a mixed bag. And I find myself shifting between extreme optimism about the world and hopelessness and despair. And that actually depends a little bit on whether I look at society or look at politics. Because scientists, engineers, innovators, and entrepreneurs continue to make amazing progress all the time. 150,000 people were lifted out of extreme poverty around the world every day for the last 20 years. And even in this time, with the pandemic raging and creating horrible human and economic consequences around the world, we must remember that the historic thing is not the virus, but the vaccine. And the fact that we were vaccinating people against the new coronavirus within a year of even learning about it. So the world is continuing to make immense progress. Yet at the same time, the world is fearful and anxious, and politics is angry and partisan. Instead of trying to maximize mutual gains, it is about taking as much as possible from others and forcing your agenda onto the others. And that, I think, is because one side is open and the other side is often too closed. Society, knowledge, technology, and the economy is a positive-sum game. It is about openness, but politics too often is about zero-sum. It is about not live and let live. It's about eat or be eaten. And my reading of history and evolutionary psychology makes me convinced that we have both within us. And this explains our progress and also why we sometimes make a mess of it all. We are very good at openness, but we also fear it. We have a double nature. We are traders, but we are also tribalists. So let's start with the first, with our openness. Why did Homo sapiens conquer the world? In a way, it's strange because we are not particularly strong compared to the others in the animal kingdom. We're not that fast. We can't even fly. We are not that good at swimming. So we don't have the physical strengths that would make us assume that we would be the conquerors of the planet. But we do have a superpower that other animals don't. And to understand which one, look into a mirror. And if you don't have a mirror, look into my eyes and look at the white of my eyes. It doesn't seem very remarkable, but in fact, it is unique in the animal kingdom. Our ape cousins, they don't have it. They and other mammals, they have brown eyes, brown sclera, so that they hide their gaze from others. If they find a tasty snack or a potential partner, they want to hide where they turn their attention to so that nobody else gets there first. So it's a way of deceiving even your closest friends and relatives. And that's the normal thing in the animal kingdom. But for human beings, it's completely different. For one reason or another, we shifted to another strategy where it was suddenly important for us to reveal our attention and our gaze to others. It's probably some 3 million years ago, some of our chimpish ancestors found out how to survive on the East African savanna because it was dangerous, precisely because we weren't particularly strong or fast. We were surrounded by big cat animals, by lions and hyenas and saber-toothed tigers, and they could kill our ancestors instantly until they found out that they could cooperate. When our ancestors 3 million years ago understood that they could throw stones at the lions, and if they synchronized and coordinated, they could surround the predators and throw rocks at them until they perished. In a brief moment in time, suddenly from being the hunted, we became the hunters. Suddenly we climbed to the top of the food chain and no animals could ever threaten us again. As long as we cooperated, as long as we revealed our attention to the others, so that if we found a predator or a prey or some other project, we cooperated, we specialized, we learned from one another, and that's how we came to conquer the planet. Because it also meant that if one chimpish ancestors to human being stumbled onto a new discovery, on a new idea, a better method or new innovation of taming fire or coming up with a wheel or a bag in which we could carry some important tools that someone came up on how to produce. We could all learn from it by looking, learning, specializing, bartering, and exchanging with the others. We came up with trade, and that made all the difference. Civilization, as the Austrian thinker Hayek put it, is the possibility of using knowledge that you do not possess yourself. That's what we came up with. I can't read a virus genome and much less come up with a vaccine against it, but I can benefit from it as long as I'm part of an open civilization where we can make use of those innovations that others come up with. And I have no idea how to turn my words into ones and zeros so that they appear as an image and audio in another country. That's remarkable, but I can make use of it because I live in an open civilization where we specialize, where we trade freely, where we exchange our best ideas for the best ideas of others. We always did that. That's what makes humans different. As long as 300,000 years ago, actually precisely at the same moment that we have remains of the first Homo sapiens, we also have the first evidence of long-distance trade, of people exchanging, buying, selling tools and pigments from rocks over far away distances. And that makes all the difference, because then suddenly you're not limited to your own brain, to your own skills. The more people you are, the more you barter and exchange and cooperate, the more progress you can make. And then it's a fairly small step from surrounding lions and throwing rocks at them to unleashing our rocks, our missiles into space and discovering other planets. This is what openness is about. Being open to surprises. Those regions who developed institutions, sometimes by mistake, that make it possible for more people to search, to look, to discover new things and innovate, they prospered. Because those societies were open to surprising new ideas, discoveries, technologies, and business models that they couldn't find out themselves. From foreigners, from merchants, from migrants and missionaries, and from minorities within society, from eccentrics, entrepreneurs, and innovators back home. And this is so important because all the technologies, cultures, and the strange, peculiar habits that we hold so dear. Once upon a time, they were minority innovations, acquired tastes that most people don't like at first. When you read technology history, from trivial discoveries like the umbrella, or the bicycle, or the car, or the personal computer, the internet and the vaccine, to the Enlightenment, to free speech and bioscience, they were all considered strange, bizarre, or dangerous. And it was only because some civilizations were a little bit more open, so that those eccentrics could dabble in those ideas and show that they held a certain worth, a certain benefit to humanity. And in the long run, others picked them up, and that made us prosper. There's an old management book called, with the title, Worthless, Impossible, Stupid. Because at one point in time, all great business models were considered worthless or impossible or stupid by most people, and sometimes all of it at the same time. And in societies that were planned according to a particular blueprint, a particular plan from the top down, those worthless, impossible, and stupid ideas, they were not allowed to thrive. They were not allowed to experiment with those ideas, and nothing much happened. But in an open society and an open market, those ideas and methods, they don't have to be tested against a plan or a blueprint. They're allowed to succeed if people pick them up spontaneously. And that's why we can make use of many more brains, many more hands, much more work and more ideas than closed societies can do. And this brings me to classical history. And that's much of my book is an exploration of the golden eras of history, because this one is not the first golden era of rapid scientific and technological development and economic growth. We've had plenty of them. We've had golden eras in different cultures: the Phoenician seafarers on the Mediterranean, pagan Rome, the Muslim Abbasid Caliphate, Confucian Song China, Catholic Renaissance Europe, and the Calvinist Dutch Republic. The common denominator was not a particular culture, ethnicity, or religion, but the fact that they were all relatively open compared to other civilizations. Open to trade, to migration, to new ideas from within society and from without. Montesquieu, the Enlightenment thinker, when he looked at the Roman Empire and tried to understand how they could create such a large empire for such a long time, did not point to their important particular skills, technologies, or methods of warfare, but the fact that they picked up new ideas to improve that all of the time. As Montesquieu said, the main reason for the Romans becoming masters of the world was that, having fought successively against all peoples, they always gave up their own practices as soon as they found better ones. End of quote. And this actually goes even for vicious warlords, as Genghis Khan, who created the largest land empire in history in a very short period of time, partly because of great skills in warfare. But where did he pick that up? Well, the point was that, as historian Jack Rutherford writes, because the Mongols had no system of their own to impose on their subjects, they were willing to adopt and combine systems from everywhere. They searched for what worked best, and when they found it, they spread it to other countries. And even though he was a terribly brutal warlord, within the empire, he imposed open commerce, religious freedom, and meritocracy, because that was the only way of creating constantly better technologies and better ways of waging war and creating prosperity for the Mongols. And when they invaded Europe, 2/3 of the invaders were not ethnic Mongols, but the best fighters, engineers, and thinkers from around the whole Mongol Empire. When we have systems like that, institutions like that, implemented for a sustained period of time, protected by rule of law, hopefully more than Genghis Khan imposed on his subjects, property rights, freedom to trade and associate, then we have predictable institutions that make unpredictable behavior and surprises and innovations possible. And then we create a quantum leap of innovation and of progress. And that's what we have seen in the Western world in the last 200 years, after the Enlightenment with the Industrial Revolution. because suddenly we had institutions like that protected for more people than ever before. And the result in numbers, objective indicators of living standards, speak volumes about how this created a whole new world. In the last 200 years, we increased life expectancy around the world from 30 to 70 years. We reduced extreme poverty from 90% to 9%. From 9 out of 10 people living in extreme poverty 200 years ago to less than 1 in 10 people in extreme poverty. And that's why we are here. That's why we can discuss ideas about history and economic history and intellectual history and what makes societies flourish and what destroys societies. Something that used to be a peculiar habit for a tiny elite in all previous civilizations. Now we are constantly debating this in newspapers and on social media every day. We have created a remarkable civilization precisely because we can benefit from knowledge, from innovations, and from goods and services that we would not be able to create ourselves. That's the good news about openness, and that's wonderful news, and we should cherish and treasure it every moment of time. But there are also some bad news, and the reference to Genghis Khan and his Mongol warriors kind of gave it away and explain those bad news. Because historically, we often develop this amazing ability to cooperate harmoniously with others, even with strangers, in order to be able to kill and steal from others. And that's the tribalist within ourselves. I talked about the trader. This is the tribalist. Because once our ancestors climbed to the top of the food chain a few million years ago on the East African savanna, no other animal could ever threaten them again, except one. Other groups of people who cooperated even better than they did. The fear that another group would organize in a better fashion and raid us and kill and steal made us acutely aware of who's with us and who's not, of us and them. This fear of raiders from the outside, but also free riders within the group, makes us very tribalist, because it's often costly in the short run to cooperate. You have to risk your life on the hunt. You have to fight hard for the spoils of war. But then at the end of it, if someone doesn't work hard for it, but just want to reap the rewards, we have to be acutely aware of the free riders as well. Raiders from the outside, free riders within. This developed a sense of who's with us and who's not, who's loyal and who's not. Because between us, between different groups, there is not a positive-sum game. It is a zero-sum game. If they kill us and steal us, we're worse off. That's the problem that we had to be acutely aware of historically, because if we weren't, we were selected out of the gene pool and we wouldn't be able to spread our ideas and our instincts to anybody else. So we're not just traders, we are also tribalists. We are constantly trying to find common ground, areas of mutual agreement, how we can create mutual benefits with others. But we're also acutely aware that they might be treacherous, they might be deceiving us, they might be out there to get us. And unfortunately, this for good historical reasons, but unfortunately, we are a little bit oversensitive to it. And here's a disturbing experiment from social psychology, a disturbing experiment about modern art. Students are being led into the laboratory, and they're divided into two different groups, depending on what they think about two modern painters, about Kandinsky or Klee, painters that they hadn't heard of before. They had no relationship to these artists, but then they're divided into different groups, they learn, they never get to meet the other students. They only learn that you are a Kandinsky student and you belong to the Kandinsky group. And now let's play an economic game where you distribute rewards between the Kandinsky group and the Klee group. And well, you've guessed it. The first thing that happens is that people become instantly loyal to their new group with other people whom they've never met, whom they will never meet ever again, only divided into this group depending on their taste in Kandinsky or Klee. Well, they become loyal and they want to give their own group as much as possible, not to themselves, but to strangers who share their own taste in art. But it gets worse. It's not just group egoism. It's also that you are even willing to forego a certain benefit to your own Kandinsky group in order to punish the Klee group. So it's not that you want as much benefit as possible for your own group. It's that you want as large a possible distance between your own group and the other group, which sounds bizarre. You're willing to forgo benefits for your own group just to punish other strangers that you've never met before, based on their taste in an artist that you've never heard about before. But it makes perfect sense if our interest in redistribution and punishment and rewards is based on this zero-sum game that we historically played between different tribes on the savannah and for hundreds of thousands of years. And this is still with us the instant we start thinking that we belong to a particular group. Not individually. That's not how we function individually. Then when we meet somebody else, we try to maximize mutual benefit. But the moment we start to think of ourselves as belonging to a group, we think of the other as a group that is threatening us. And that's why politics is often so angry, because the others, they're the enemy, and we have to defeat them, even if it costs us ourselves dearly. We think that the world is a zero-sum game because the world was often a zero-sum game. Not always. As I pointed out, we've benefited tremendously from cooperation, from trade, even with other tribes and even with strangers. But not always is not enough. If the world is sometimes a zero-sum game, that's often enough, because our tribalism, our willingness to benefit our group at the expense of others, and our fear of the other group is often, it functions like a smoke detector, as a fire alarm. And you know, fire alarms, they are designed to be oversensitive. Because if the smoke alarm at the hotel or in your apartment misses a couple of real fires, that's the end of it. Then you're selected out of the gene pool. But if it's oversensitive and it gives you a few faulty warnings, they mistake cooking dinner for a fire, that's not that dangerous. You just become more aware, you look around, and if you leave the apartment or the hotel, that's not that dangerous, but it's dangerous to miss a fire. Well, that's just like our tribalist fear of other groups, because historically, if you weren't oversensitive to tiny difference that shows that the others might not be loyal to you, they might kill you. So we're oversensitive, because this world where we almost always play positive sum games with others, in science, technology, in free enterprise, free trade, that is new. Even though we've always dabbled in it, the fact that we have predictable institutions that protect this for people so that we can always play positive sum game with strangers and foreigners and people on the other side of the planet, that's brand new. And economic growth and scientific and technological innovation that makes you see that it lifts almost all boats and make most people better off within your own lifetime, that is new. That's something that has only happened in the last few hundred years. Think about it. If we were to condense Homo sapiens history, 300,000 years of history, into just 24 hours, into the last day, basically. Well, then the 200 years when almost everything great happened, when life expectancy went from 30 to 70, when extreme poverty came down from 90 to 9%, when we increased living standards by some 3,000%. That's only the last 60 seconds. And those are great 60 seconds, and we should be happy to be living within those 60 seconds and not previously. So that's where everything, all that progress comes from. But it's not where our instincts come from. It's not where our attitudes and some of our belief systems come from. They do not come from those 60 seconds, but often from the 86,400 previous seconds. And of course, our prehistory is much longer, much, much longer than those 300,000 years. So it's not strange that we haven't fully adapted to this new world where we are making this rapid progress based on positive sum games, on open societies, and on free markets. Our instincts constantly tell us that something's wrong, and if somebody else benefits over there, it's probably at our expense. There is an old Eastern European story, a fable that highlights this tendency. One day, God appears before Vladimir, who is a poor peasant farmer. And God tells him that this is your lucky day, because I will grant you one wish, whatever it is. And Vladimir is overjoyed and he starts to think, but before he chooses anything, God adds a caveat. He says, look, anything I give to you will be granted to your neighbor Ivan twice over. And now Vladimir frowns and is a bit disappointed because he doesn't want to benefit his neighbor. So he thinks about it and hard, and suddenly he lights up as he comes up with a perfect plan and says, okay, God, take out one of my eyes. Because if God does that, God has to take out two eyes from Ivan. So Vladimir creates a greater distance between himself and his neighbor. We don't act like that individually. Again, obviously, as individuals, we try to maximize mutual gain, and Vladimir and Ivan are probably traders constantly coming up with ways of benefiting one another. But as soon as we think that we are members of a tribe in constant warfare with the other tribe, the other group, the other party, the other race, the other religion, the other country, the trading partner, well, then we start to often instinctively trying to maximize not mutual gain, but distance to the other, which turns popular perceptions upside down. Because traditionally, we often say that individually we are ruthless and greedy, but collectively at the voting booth, we are enlightened and live in harmony. It's actually often precisely the other way around. As individuals and families in civil society and on the market, we try to come up with ways of pleasing others, because that will also help us rather than punishing them and creating a large distance to them. Collectively, we are not. Collectively, often we behave like Vladimir. We are trying to protect ourselves by creating a large distance to the other groups, especially in times of crisis. And this is my reading of history as well. Often in times of economic depressions, military threats, natural disasters, or pandemics, we are naturally fearful and afraid of the world. And this triggers a societal fight or flight instinct. We want to find a scapegoat to fight, or trading partner, or foreigners, or big business, or we want to flee, we want to escape and protect ourselves behind trade barriers or building walls against the world. We want to be protected by the safety of the tribe, by the strong men, by big governments. Actually, social psychology experiments shows that even just watching a horror movie, makes us, after being frightened by it, more collectivist. And we want to hide within a tribe. And we're not necessarily interested in making progress or finding mutual ground with others, but rather to fight our corner and be protected by the tribe. And this is obviously the thing that demagogues and authoritarians around the world exploit all the time. Politics is too often about making us think that we belong to a particular group and that we are threatened by the other groups, and we have to beat them up. The 1% of the richest, big business, the foreigners, the immigrants, the minorities, or that other country that now benefited because of all the exports, something like that. And the dark irony is that this is often historically how we undermine progress. We undermine openness, and then we undermine progress because we make less use of the brains, the ideas, the production of others. Because we start to engage in conflict, in confiscation. We build walls, we start trade wars, and sometimes we start real wars. And that's an important contributing factor behind why the golden eras were all ended. Previous cultures, they began to think of themselves, often in times of crisis, during pandemics, during natural disasters, in times of conflict, they began to take out one of their eyes to make the others suffer more. And do that twice, and you're blind, and you lose your way. And that is the story of Abierto, of open, that we have plenty of golden eras in history, and they were based on openness. That's the first common denominator. But the second common denominator is that they all collapsed. They were all ended. And often when they lost their self-confidence and started to shift inwards and stop thinking about how they could innovate and prosper in the future, but started to think about how they could fight their own corner rather than anything else, against the other tribes. So they all collapsed except one. And that's the one that we're in right now. And that's the message of my book. Don't take that for granted, because it's not automatic. It doesn't happen by itself, no matter what we think, no matter which belief systems and ideas we start to believe in. Arnold Toynbee, the great historian, he said he was very angry at other historians who had simple analogs between societies and human beings. They started to say that, look, this civilization got old and tired, or it got old and died. And Toynbee pointed out that no, look, there's no pre-programmed life expectancy in civilizations. There's no DNA there or anything that says that their time is out. Toynbee instead pointed out that civilizations only die from murder or from suicide. And as he added, most often it is suicide. And that's the bad news and the good news. The bad news is that we have this temptation to commit suicide as cultures, as civilizations. The good news is that then it's for us to decide. It's not that we'll perish from old age. If we do it, it's because we fall for the bad side in our double nature. We have seen the enemy, and he is within us, in our double nature, within the tribalist, all the good and all the bad. As Borges also wrote in A New Refutation of Time, time is a river which sweeps me along, but I am the river. It is a tiger which destroys me, but I am the tiger. It is a fire which consumes me, but I am the fire. So the good news is we don't have to go the same way as the civilizations that perished. We just have to bring our minds up to speed with the beautiful world our minds created, to understand and appreciate the value of openness and progress, and to realize that we can always create institutions that make turn the game into a positive sum game. As long as we're safe in our possessions, we have our rule of law, property rights, free markets and free trade that makes it, and free speech and intellectual openness to make sure that we benefit from what others create rather than being threatened by it. To understand that, to appreciate that and not fall for our closed-mindedness, that's what we have to do. My book is my way of explaining why we have to do it. It's not just that we can do it, we have to do it because, as the great novelist Mario Vargas Llosa puts it, we can never decisively win the battle against the tribe because it is within us, but we can lose the battle. And that's what we must not allow to happen. Thank you.